What's up, everybody? My name is Brandon Devericks. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this here today. Welcome to the Just Be You podcast, episode 1 today, man. This has been a long time coming, man. A lot of time and effort has been put into this. I wanted to kind of throw a surprise episode out there, one in which I didn't really tell anybody about. Um, this was something that originally I was going to have my guests in here and whatnot, but I felt like, you guys deserve to have an episode where one, you get to know what the Just Be You podcast really is all about. To give you some insight as to what we're going to be talking about, what the theme is, wondering if it's even for you. If you want to tune into this and if you want to be a part of the Just Be You family, today's your episode, man. So strap in, whether it's a Monday afternoon, you're at the gym on the treadmill, Saturday, Sunday morning, getting some coffee in you, man. Feel free to sit back and relax. Today's episode is going to be a great one, man. I'm so excited. Uh, to start off with, man, I wanted to really dive into what the Just Be You podcast is, where the idea came from, right? So, where my heart is on it. And also, we get to talk about our guests in the future. We get to talk about the certain topics that we're going to be discussing and what we can learn from. I promise you, there are so many powerful stories and people, incredible people with stories that are going to blow you away. And I can't wait to get into that today. And then, honestly, at the end of the episode here, towards the end, I'm going to tell my story a little bit and not in its entirety, but I'm going to tell a pretty good amount of it. And what I'm also going to do during that time frame is be vulnerable. And that is what the theme of the Just Be You podcast is. It is just pure vulnerability. I want people to come onto this podcast and tell their stories. I think it's so important that we do that as a society, as a community, um, and to be able to tell each other stories. But one thing that is so passionate to me, I was telling a friend the other day, is that I think a lot of times on social media or really anywhere, we live in a culture now where, I think that we like to show that our life is almost perfect. And to be very clear, I mean, I'm just as guilty of that as well. But we live in a culture where on our social medias and stuff like that, it looks so good. And I started noticing that in myself. I noticed that in my friends and anywhere, and it's nothing against them. I think that that's just what we do, and so I kind of got old to me a little bit, and I wanted to create a platform where we do the exact opposite, right? So instead of showing us being perfect and being that everything's all good, why can't we show the opposite side? Why can't we not be perfect, right? Why can't we show our weaknesses, our flaws, the things that we're insecure about, right? I truly think that when we embrace the hard conversations, the things that we struggle with most, I actually think the most growth comes with it, ironically enough. And so, I really want to get into that today, but where the Just Be You podcasts came from, right, it was never just my idea to just have a podcast. It never really crossed my mind, to be honest with you. Uh, I didn't think that that was something that was meant for me, to be honest. And in the beginning, I would have to say maybe a year ago, I'm sitting around, and to be honest with you guys, I don't mean this in a hey, look at me way. I mean it in a way of, there was a time in my life where there was things that I set out to do. There was boxes I wanted to check, and I found myself checking a lot of those boxes. And while that's great and everything, I think that with time, there became a moment where it's like, man, I'm checking all these boxes, but what's next? It's almost like there was something missing in that, right? I think of two people. I think of, Tom Brady after he won his last Super Bowl, and someone that from the outside looking in has reached the mountaintop, won over and over, had all the success, the money, you name it. Um, but, even after his final Super Bowl that he won, he said, wow, like you kind of sit there and you already are thinking like, wow, that was it. What's next? Tim Tebow said something similar. He put so much time into a sport and looked back on it and said, man, there was something else I could have put so much time into, And so I started thinking about who I was and me at my core, which by the way took a lot of time to search deep into. But I want to be so clear, guys, what this podcast is first and foremost is a growth based podcast. As I said, one that shows vulnerability and storytelling. Um, but it is also a faith based podcast. And, I would have to hate you to not tell you what Jesus has done in my life, and I'm going to have a lot of people on here that are going to talk about what their faith has done in their life and what Jesus has done in their life. I'm a Jesus lover. I'll own that. What he has done in my life is unbelievable. I can't wait to talk about that, not only in this episode a little bit, but even just down the road, man. It is so exciting. I'm so thankful to be sitting here in front of you. I'm just like anybody else, man. I'm flawed. I'm imperfect, but I'm working on myself. I try to be there for others. And honestly, being there for others and serving and doing those things, that is where I have found the most fulfillment in my life. Not the winning in the sports, not the tournaments I did or anything. I am most fulfilled when I'm serving people, when I'm listening to people, doing anything I can to help, and that's been me at my core my whole life. The more that I look at it, I'll talk more about my career later, but from being a teacher to being in the military to being a coach and you name it, I've always wanted to be there for people, and that's my heart. So the Just Be You podcast originally started with actually music. It was going to be music based. I love music. I serve on a worship team at my church, and I love playing acoustic guitar. I love music in general. But, one thing that I wanted to do when things slowed down and I felt like I had checked a lot of boxes, I started praying a lot. I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? I'm doing all these things, but I feel like you've given me a gift. You've given me a calling. What can I do, to kind of fulfill your word, right? To bring people to you, to make people more curious. What can I do? That's what I want, and I truly believe he's called me to do this. This is a calling. This is not something that I just want to do. This is not for Brandon Devericks. I am called to do this, and it's an honor, man. It's a privilege. But I wanted to do shows where at like coffee shops and so on and so forth, where artists can come in and sing covers of their favorite songs, but they're also telling their story in the meantime. Maybe they're singing songs with so much more emotion, um, whether it's sad or anything exciting, but it gives them the free expression to be able to talk about their story, and it made me happy, right? Like I was like, man, that might be it. But the more that I thought about that and prayed on it, I said, Lord, I just don't think that's for me. I don't think it's for me because I don't know what my impact is with that. I don't know how far Brandon goes with that, right? Or to accomplish the mission that I want. And so the more that I thought about that, I'm like, man, this it has to go in a different direction, right? And so I just said, Lord, I'm just going to pray on it, let the weeks go by and just instill in me what you want from me, right? And there was a lot of weeks that went by where I'm like, man, I don't know what to do, and all I knew is I wanted it to be people oriented. And so one day, thankfully, I took some time out of my week, and I tend to do that quite often, man. And I was reading a leadership book that I chose just for that day. I read multitude of books. I can't just stick with one and read the whole thing. I like to hit topics, but anyway. Um, so I was reading a leadership book, and ironically, that day when I wasn't even really thinking about anything, on the last paragraph, it was talking about being authentic and being our true self, which I think we should all do. I think that every single one of you that are watching this, I promise you, you are unique in your own way, man. God has made you who you are for a reason. There is no one else like you on this planet. I promise you. You are so uniquely made. You are seen, you are valued, you are loved. And I just can't express that enough. And I'm reading that, and, you know, authenticness and just being real, right? And then all of a sudden, there it is. The very last three words of that paragraph was just be you. And I read that and it just hit me. It was almost like, man, Lord, you really just put that on my heart, right? And so when you think about making a podcast and things, you wonder what you're going to call it. What are you going to talk about? I'm like, man, I'm no expert in anything. I mean, what am I going to do? Talk about basketball, maybe? Now people are doing that, So when I read that, it hit me like a wave, like a literal tsunami wave, man. It was awesome. And I immediately came up with the name right there. My whole life, everyone's called me B. Um, my name's Brandon, obviously, and so the just be you, it just fit perfectly. And also, I thought about what's my message to any guest that comes in here and sits down next to me that we're going to film with. My one and only thing I would say to them is, hey, just be yourself. That's all I want you to do. Be vulnerable, tell your full story, and don't hold back. And that's what this podcast is all about. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, man. I truly think it can make a difference to anyone watching. And as I said, the overall theme of being vulnerable, I think it's so important, especially as men, um, for men to show vulnerability. I really want to take a second to talk about that because there's a lot of men out there, I think, and I'm guilty of this too. I was raised to be a man that, held everything in, that you had to have it figured out, that you had to be the tough one, you ain't going to complain, you ain't going to do this. And then I go to the military and man, it just almost like added on an entire other layer to that of a quote that was just literally that said, forget your feelings. And man, it took me a lot of time. I did some counseling, because of it, because I couldn't feel any emotion. Um, but I think men are raised that way, unfortunately, and it's hard for men to break out of that cycle. And I hope that I just want this to be a small example of that. Like men, I encourage them to be more vulnerable, show the things that you're struggling with, bring them to your spouses, your friends, your family, um, and communicate. I hope that when people watch these episodes with the topics we're talking about, I hope that maybe when they're done watching, it encourages a mother to go talk to their son or daughter, it encourages a father to go talk to his son or his daughter. I hope it encourages a friend to go talk to a friend that might be struggling or just in general. What's interesting is that when I had this idea to do this, I'm like, man, I'm starting to circulate like, okay, who am I going to bring on to this podcast, right? And I'm thinking of my friends, right? I'm thinking of people closest to me. And I'm thinking, wow, even my closest of friends that I've known since third grade, since kindergarten, I don't know their full story. I don't know their deepest things that they struggle with. And now I have to make up for that and have those conversations, which at times might be uncomfortable, but man, I've done that over the last year, and man, has it brought me closer to people. Um, I think through communication and showing our flaws to one another is truly where growth happens in relationships. I'm a firm believer in that. But that's where my heart is on this podcast, man. It's a true, genuine thing. Once again, it's not about me; it's about you. And if you're watching this, I would love for you to not only just subscribe and like it, but comment, man. I want to hear from you. I'll put my Instagram in there. Please message me about things that you want to hear about in the future, any questions. We would love to communicate with you, seriously, from the bottom of my heart. That means the world to me. It doesn't matter if I reach one viewer that maybe helps them in some way or another, or many. It does not matter equally. To me, it's equally the same. And so that is where my heart is on this podcast. And as we move forward into the future, what's so exciting is that we have people that are willing to show that those vulnerabilities, the weakness, or whatever you want to call it, they're showing their strength to be here and to talk about those things that have most hurt them. Our first episode next will be overcoming. That's the episode title. It's with my grandfather, who has overcome so many things in his life, man, from drug addiction, um, just addiction of all kinds, you name it, in and out of prison, and then a life altering physical injury slash issue, being paralyzed from the waist down, midway through his life at one point. And I can't imagine the change that you have to embrace, right? And not only that, but his faithfulness to find Christ and so on and so forth. It's so powerful. the episode after that talking about being still. It's something I have tattooed on my hand that I look at every day. I have to be reminded of that. That in the storms of life, man, just be still. Be still and know that God's with us at all times, man. It's something that's so important to me. But that episode called "Being Still" is going to be so powerful. A woman that comes from so much childhood trauma, trauma that I know a lot about, and her going through that and growing up in that, and how to get out of it, how to work on it, right? How to grow away from it as much as possible, and so her path to being, a Jesus lover, to a pastor, to a wife, to a mother of three incredible children, who are now all adults and living their life. I mean, it's beautiful. To also dealing with loss. We're going to talk about people we've lost. I'm sure every one of us can relate to that. Talking about perspective with Jenna Smith. Um, we're also going to be talking about our calling with Philip Warda. So many people. And one of my favorite episodes I'm looking forward to, which is the main theme of this entire podcast. He's going to hit it on the nose, is my trainer, Nick Nutter. And the episode is called Strength and Vulnerability. And you want to hear his story, I promise you. I promise you, you don't want to miss it, man. We're going to be really diving into some hard conversations. I remember just last weekend, I was with a friend and he was asking me what this podcast was all about, and I finally got to tell him. And the first thing he said to me was, "Man, it's going to be some hard conversations, man. Tears are going to be flying." I said, "Yeah, to be honest, but that's why we're here." And I feel like we, as a society, as a culture, need to do more of it. And I'm hoping just to be an example of it, man. But, anyways, that is where my heart is. That's what we are looking forward to here um, with this podcast. And I guess right now, man, I'll get into a little bit of my story. I'll try to set the tone and be a little vulnerable by any means necessary, guys. This is not a poor me thing. I'm not here to look for attention. Once again, I'm setting the mood of you know, sharing some things that have been hard for me. Um, things that haven't been easy, some things that have been good. So it's gonna be a little bit of everything, right? But so me growing up, my parents first and foremost, they had me at 16 years old, pregnant at 15. Um, I can't. I mean, right now I'm a father, of two beautiful, intelligent, goofy, silly, amazing children, and I cannot imagine having them at that age. I just truly cannot imagine it, man. I can't imagine the struggle my parents went through, um, and how hard that is. And even today, things that I've talked to my parents about, um, I don't talk to my dad anymore really at all. Me and my mom's relationship has grown to get better. It was damaged at one point, but I'm starting to understand, and the more I get older, what they sacrificed even at that time. They didn't know what they were doing, and I have to forgive some things, and so on and so forth. And growing up, I know that they had to really put on, right? I mean, you're 16 years old, you got to drop out of school, you have to provide for a kid, you got to find out where you're going to live, what you're going to do, how you're going to make money. Not only that, but you're in a relationship that coexisted on pain and, I guess, I mean, what, dopamine? Like, you're seeing each other because it fulfills happiness in your brain. There was probably not much of a connection at that point yet. They're just kids and going fast, and so, my parents had me, and they went through that. And what that meant for me was, I mean, as a kid, what I remember most was spending so much time with my grandparents. And I'm so thankful for that because I think it helped me grow up just a little bit faster. Really helped me with perspective and whatnot. And not only that, but I just think that, they instilled so much in me that now at 30, I'm understanding what they instilled in me. My grandparents really instilled the foundation of who I am sitting here in front of you. I just remember I would be there every weekend, it felt like. And, I'll start with my mom's side, my pop-up and my nana, they were just the people that spoiled me. I wanted to be around my pop-up all the time and never wanted to leave him. He's the one that would put me on his Harley and we would drive off for miles. People don't do that these days, putting a 5-year-old on a Harley. But I'm thankful for that. My Nana was such a sweetheart, man. She just was so, she was like a best friend. She would watch WWE with me. She would do it all. Um, I remember spending every everlasting moment with them. And when I wasn't with them, it felt like I was with my grandpa Will and my grandma Patty, who honestly I think was two of the most important people in my entire life because the amount of time I spent with them, my grandpa Will, to me being a father figure, um, and he was the one I mentioned who's going to be in episode one. And just an incredible man, an incredible woman, and my grandmother, and their story is awesome. And I'm going to bring them probably both on at one point to talk about their marriage because it's so powerful. But, anyways, uh, growing up with them, what they did for me is they instilled Jesus in me at a very young age. For some reason, it's the most core memory of my life is when I used to walk down the steps of my grandmother's house. I would walk into the kitchen, or I'm sorry, the dining room, and every day I would look on that kitchen table, just like right here, and I would see their Bibles right there with highlighters, and they weren't really closed. I think 95% of the time they're just open. And man, I didn't really know what that meant back then. But nowadays I look at it, man, my grandparents were just learning. They were going through it. They're trying to get closer to Christ. And I admire that so much. And that's who I try to mimic now, which has been the greatest choice of my life. But I remember my grandmother used to wake up early, and my grandfather, who, as I said, went through that terrible issue with being paralyzed. Man, he would wake up with my grandma every morning and read his Bible with some coffee with her. And I think that's what I learned what love was. Kind of, it was just so powerful to see him do that and to see her do that, work coinciding together. But, um, I loved that growing up. They took me to church every Sunday, and it was just really awesome. Moving forward, as I said, I think one thing that was missing in the household with my parents was emotion. I think what was missing was quality time. I spent a lot of time by myself and dealing with my own emotions, I think alone. And, that's this how I remember it. My dad growing up, unfortunately, with all the pain that he went through as a child, and trauma he went through as a child, he resorted to alcohol when I was growing up. And so what I remember about my dad growing up is two things. He was at every sports game, which was great. But outside of the sports games, I just remember him just being on the couch, just drinking. So my dad was an alcoholic my whole life up until recent years. Um, but that was the household I grew up in. It wasn't very emotionally stable. It was safe. Like I had everything I needed. I had my video games, I had a nice room. I had everything I needed. My parents did the best they absolutely could, in my opinion, and that's great. But that hurt a lot growing up, and I didn't realize how much it hurt me until I became an adult, right? Until I began being in a relationship of my own years ago. Um, not being able to grow up and watch a healthy marriage, man, I think was tough on me, and I wish that things were just really different. But man, it's just going through it as time went on. I realized that growing up, that emotional support wasn't there. So I resorted to sports. Sports was everything to me. It's what I woke up, what I would eat, breathe, and sleep. Man, just basketball and baseball. Football would be along with that later on. Um, but I remember growing up, and right before I get to high school, man, I'm thinking, man, I just want to play college basketball. That was like the number one thing. I just want to be a college basketball player. I just loved it that much. Well, in high school, I met who I would end up marrying, and be with for 12 years of my life before a divorce. And, I met, my ex wife at 16 years old in high school, which was a crazy turning point. I had no clue what to think of it. It was just so wonderful, um, meeting your best friend at the time and going through life together. I remember in high school, man, I had a lot of good friends. I had incredible people in my life, and but one thing I wanted to do right after high school was over was to move out and and kind of just start my own life. I felt like I was already doing it by myself in a lot of ways, emotionally, um, and I wanted to get out and go. So I had the privilege my freshman year of college. I moved in with my two of my best friends that I've known since kindergarten. They're brothers. They're incredible, man. I got to live with them in downtown Columbus. We went to Columbus State. Um, spent a year down there, and that year to me, I think was the biggest turning point in my life, and as far as like personal growth, because I go down there, I'm learning how to live sort of on my own, um, responsibility and things. And I remember at that point in time, I was so mission oriented. I was in a relationship. I was in kind of a long distance one, an hour and a half away. So I had, we didn't see each other that much. But what I wanted to do was dedicate myself to making it on a college basketball team. I wasn't recruited, I was undersized, wasn't very good. And so I dedicated all of my time. I worked at a gym because I knew if I worked at a gym, I could be there as much time as I wanted to for free. And I dedicated my entire life to training and being with my roommates and school. And at that time, I was going for law enforcement as a degree. Um, things were good. I remember you fast forward 6, 8 months, whatever it was. I think we're in March at that point. I finally, after all the training I did and everything that was going on that year, man, as I said, all I wanted to do was make a college basketball team. And uh, I remember I reached out to, it was a Monday morning. I woke up at 7 a.m. and I was sick of it. I was so angry. Like, I just want to be on a team. I want a chance. All the March Madness stuff, all the colleges pretty much got done. And I'm calling every single D3, D2 school in the entire state of Ohio. I'm calling every D2 school in Western Pennsylvania, every D3 school and D2 school in Southern Michigan, Eastern Indiana. I mean, I'm calling everywhere. It took me, I think, like 11 hours. And, no luck. I'm leaving messages of just trying to get an opportunity. And, I remember I got a call when I was with my roommates in the car, and it was from Tiffin, Ohio, and I knew exactly who it was. It was Coach Jerry Basilla at Tiffin at the time. He was the head coach. Um, I ended up doing a tryout there. Cameron Joyce was my guards coach. Coach Solinger, whose brother Jared Solinger was in the NBA, was the other bigs coach. It was an incredible experience, man, of where I could finally put all that I worked so hard for out there. I remember going into that office with those guys and talking and having such an incredible conversation, getting offered to play there, a D2 school. And it's like my dream had come true. And I put hundreds of hours into there, into that sport, and or thousands at this point, and so, at that time I was so happy. I remember driving home and crying. And I remember the next day I just felt empty. I felt empty of like, man, that was great, but and I kind of just felt that, but I was so young that I didn't realize what that was. And so I'm still chasing this dream, and at this point I'm ready to really go as hard as I possibly can and get my body bigger and stronger. Um, I ended up hurting my back really bad, an injury that altered my entire career. I remember going to the doctor with my mom the following, I think it was a week after I got hurt, where I was on crutches because I couldn't. My whole left side I felt like shut down. I couldn't walk. Um, it was awful. But having a doctor tell me that I would never play the game of basketball again was really hard to hear at the time. They looked at my third lumbar vertebrae, things were bad. He advised me never play again. And so, I went through that. It is what it is. I started to walk away from basketball and started just to coach, where I became a freshman head coach for a few years. I think it was 3 years under Coach Jack Banks at the Cloverleaf District, man. And it was awesome. It was a good learning experience to lead some young men. At that time, I'm still building my relationship with my high school sweetheart at the time. Um, and that whole situation, relationship wise, I want to touch on that moving forward because it was so special, man. I got to, be with someone for 12 years. Um, I moved into the last final stages of college where I transferred around. I was at the University of Akron. She was at Kent State. and she's finishing a nursing degree. We buy a home together, we renovate it. It was, I just felt like man, I made it. We had this beautiful home, and me and her, we ended up having our first child, Michaela. Um, where I was a stay-at-home dad, I got to fill that role for I don't know how many months, but I think it was less than a year. But it was just incredible, man. And now to truly be real with you, I think that that's where a lot of things started getting really difficult in life, man. I started noticing a partner that was a little bit different. I saw her going through things of her own that I had no idea how to help with. And while there's a lot of things that I wish that I could have changed, I just know that some things were out of my hands, and it kills me to say that, but I felt like at the time there was a little bit of a drift at that point, a little bit of a shaking in the relationship. You fast forward, and I remember, me and my wife at the time, we had a daughter, and now she's going to stay home and take care of her. And now it's me who just got out of college. My first job was a teaching job. I have a teaching degree to be a health teacher. I had a health teacher growing up in middle school, Coach Ward, who was just my guy, man. He was just the coolest teacher I've ever seen. Like, he was that guy in the building who everyone loved him. He would look out for people. He'd make sure you were doing good, and he took care of you. And I wanted to be that for students. Um, but I started teaching, and teaching was great. I learned a lot from it. I think the biggest thing that I learned from teaching was empathy. I taught in an inner city school, where so many kids are just less fortunate, and things are a little tougher in that district. And so, I got to learn a lot about empathy and people's feelings and where they come from. I remember on one of my final days of working at that school, I had a young lady come up to me, and she put a letter in my hand, and I still have it in one of my books at home. And it's I remember her just telling me, Mr. B, Mr. Devers, like, without you, I wouldn't be here. And you believed in me when no one else would. You listened to me when no one else would. And if any teacher out there is listening, if anyone in a leadership position is listening, like, everybody that you work with matters. Every single person. I remember if you have, I remember I had a feeling that she was struggling. And if I didn't have that intuition or the confidence or the faith to just go up and talk to her and hopefully try to make a difference, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm super thankful that I did. And she was an incredible human, man. She really was. Um, but teaching just taught me empathy. I don't say that as like a, hey, look at me. I say that as because people in these positions, man, we have such a unique opportunity to make a difference. Such a unique opportunity to make a difference, man. It's incredible. But eventually I had to walk away from teaching, man. And at that time, me and the wife started financially struggling a little bit, right? Like, I'm a teacher, I'm trying to provide for my daughter and my wife at the time. And so me and her looked into options of the military, right? Of how it can help us out pay back student loans and how it could help us with some extra income. And I always wanted to serve. My family had served before. Um, I felt like it was who I was to my core. And so I ended up joining the United States military as a combat engineer to help, my family and things. And the hardest thing, I think, easily, that I've ever done is when I ended up leaving. My wife at the time was pregnant with our second daughter, Cameron. And I knew that the decision that we were making, that I was put in a very difficult spot, and not just me. I know that my wife was put into a very difficult position as well. And, I will regret it for the rest of my life that I missed the birth of my second child, being away. And at the time, being young, you think, oh, it's fine. I'm providing. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. But man, did that break me. That broke me in ways that I'll never heal from. Um, because you start to realize that that's the most precious thing in your entire life. that there's nothing more important than that. I have to look at my daughter one day when she's older and understands, like, hey, daddy wasn't there. I didn't witness the most important moment of your life. And, it kills me all the time to say that. I know my heart was in the right place, but, and I know that was a we decision on me and my partner at the time, but I know that that really hurt her. I know that that really affected our relationship, as much as I hate to say that. Um, but, I wish I could have been there and everything, but, we recovered. I got back home. I felt like everything was good. I remember when I got back home, I was applying for a job at First Energy, which is my career, and you know, I didn't think I would ever get in there. I had a really good friend that was a worship pastor, a youth pastor at my church and things, and he was a really good friend of mine. We played sports together, and he worked for the company. And I was throwing it out there like, "Hey, man, I'm looking to make more money for my family. I want to keep my wife at home. What's my chances here? I'm a teacher. Like, I'm not an engineer. I don't have an electrical background. Long story short, I remember I took a lot of tests for them. I failed them over and over. And I remember just praying, my God, if this is supposed to happen, just make it happen. If it's not, I'm going to give up on it. And I remember the very last time that I tried for that position, I ended up getting a call back and interviewing and getting it. And it was a dream job. It took care of me, it took care of my family. And guys, when I tell you in this moment that at everything in my life at that point, I felt like I had reached the mountaintop. I had felt like everything that I wished for, everything that I worked for, the American dream, whatever you want to call it, I felt like I had made it. I'm on top of the mountain, I got my hands up, like all is good, you know, and everything at that point collapsed right underneath me. My relationship, being able to be with my children, everything fell. And it was the hardest season of my life, which was 3 years ago today. Not like today, but 3 years ago from right, pretty much this time frame. And I ended up, me and my wife at the time, we were together for 12 years. I started over time seeing changes, and our marriage ended in a horrific way. And it's not my position to say what happened, with that person. Um, just know that it ended in a terrible way. Um, and it broke me. And, I was with my kids that night when it happened. And, I remember them, sleeping in my bed with me that night. The marriage ended, um, over physical, violence and things like that. And, it just, I knew that my world had collapsed all right there. Um, from there, it turned into a lot of ugliness, man, where what had happened in my marriage, I felt like I was now all of a sudden had it pulled back on me, where, I was being accused of things that didn't happen, um, told, you know, um, whatever, that this guy is this and that and the other, just to, make someone else look good. And, I remember, at that time of things going on, man, I wasn't able to see my children, because of what was being said about me, um, false things. And I had to go months without seeing my kids. I had to, be out of the home that I worked really hard for, and so did my partner, and but all of it just, as I said, it just collapsed out of nowhere, man. And I know being away from my children, which, if you know me, you know that, like, being a dad is the single most important thing to me. I cherish it more than anything. I have the most amazing time with my children. I have the best bond with those little girls, and there's nothing that's going to ever be able to take that away. But when I went through a season of, like, not seeing my children, and it got really quiet, uh, things slowed down. To be completely real with you guys, man, I didn't want to be here anymore. I a few different times, I remember, I just felt like the world was better off without me in it. I was never necessarily suicidal of any means, but man, did it just seem like a better fit that, man, I've taken a really big loss. I can't recover from this. And, it was just so hard, man. I remember there was one day specifically that I'll never forget was that, I was sitting there and I'm anxious, I'm sweating, man. And I was so depressed. I was so down and out. And it felt like the world had just like completely hit me. I was so scared, man. I was so terrified that I just didn't know. I was so scared to be by myself, and I had to jump up. Thankfully, we had a reach one night in Canton. Went over there. It was a worship night. Thankfully, I got some help and things like that, man. But I want to rewind just a little bit to my biggest, in my opinion, my biggest moment of my entire life was after the divorce and everything. And I'm sitting at that home which was empty. She took all the furniture out and everything's pretty much gone at this point. And I remember I hit that hardwood floor in my living room and I just started praying. I started crying. I'm just bawling my eyes out, man. And I remember I had my phone. I turned YouTube worship on that I would listen to on a cycle all the time, and just random songs, and I put it down, and I just remember hitting my knees and putting my head on the hardwood floor and praying harder than I ever have. Just praying and crying like, Lord, I don't know what you want from me here. I don't know why this has happened. I don't know why I'm here right now. I don't deserve this. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm ticked off. I'm a lot of things, y'all. And guys, when I tell you this, I mean it so profoundly and so seriously, man. I just remember the song "Reckless Love" came on by Corey Asbury. It was a 7 minute, 8 minute video that talked about Luke chapter 15, which is my favorite Bible verse that I want to share with you today, man. It's a parable in the Bible that speaks about, if a shepherd loses 100 sheep, or I'm sorry, loses one sheep, he leaves the 99 to go find the lost one. And I remember that song coming on, and I felt like that lost one. I felt like I had lost my way. I felt alone. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit, put its arms underneath mine and said, "Son, get up, move forward. You're loved, you are seen, and you have no idea the plans I have for you." And that was a moment that I've never felt more genuine love in my life. There was nothing anybody could have told me, but there was some overwhelming sense of love in my heart in that moment that I cannot explain. And so, from there, that moment changed my life and it changed my perspective. And I'm super, super thankful for it, man. And, I stand here today as a man who, has been through a 12-year marriage that ended, um, been through a lot of different things. I remember throughout that time of even when I was 20, I think I was 21 at the time. Um, at that time, I lost one of my greatest friends in the world, which I'm going to talk about in one of my episodes here coming up, to suicide, man. And I know that took such a toll on me, and I knew that it had a ripple effect into my marriage. I had an uncle that was 6 months older than me, man, that was like a brother to me. There was nobody that understood me more than he did, and there was no one that understood him more than I did. And I remember just 2 years after my best friend had took his own life, my uncle Travis did too. And when I tell y'all that I was such a dark person after losing two of the funniest, goofiest, most incredible people in the world, I know that had an effect on my relationships, on people in life, my faith, everything. And why do I say all of this? Once again, it's not a poor me story, y'all. It's there's healing in talking about it, but also I want you guys to know that no matter how far you feel out of the fight, man, you're not. You're loved. I promise you. I don't care if it's one person or many. I just hope that you seek out to talk to people, I want to make it so clear that throughout all the things I've been through, you guys are going to hear so much more detail about my story later on. There's so much more I've left out. But I want to normalize that going to get counseling or therapy, it doesn't make you a weak person. It does not make you a weak person. I think that society cannot condemn us for having the strength and the courage to go out and seek help and try to grow and learn and better ourselves. Not only that, but we're recognizing we have a problem or many. It's they can't condemn us for wanting to do what's right and what's right by others as well to get better and try to just say there's something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. This is life. You've been through things, you have a story, and your story deserves to be heard. And I just encourage you guys to have those difficult conversations, man, to talk about emotions, talk about feelings. Um, and as I said, as these episodes go on, I'm so excited to share so much more in depth. I wanted to keep this episode short, um, and just kind of just softly put it out there who I am, guys. I promise you, I'm someone that just loves people. I wasn't always who I am today, but today I stand as someone that loves Jesus. I love those around me. I would do absolutely anything for anybody. Um, I'm just so thankful for the life that I get to live. It's a privilege. I get to be here. I get to have two incredible daughters. I get to be a father. I get to be an employee at my job. I get to be a friend. I get to be a son. I mean, I'm so thankful to be where I'm at. And I have so far to go. Anything that you might see in me, guys, I promise you I'm a work in progress, just like anybody else. And um, I really hope that you stick around in this podcast. I hope that you grow with us and listen to some stories. Maybe you'll find yourself here one day. As I said, guys, please subscribe, man. Get on here, join the family, leave me comments. I would love to hear from you, man. I truly would. Um, I truly don't think there was anything else that I wanted to cover. Um, but I can't thank you guys enough for your time, man. So if you guys don't mind, what I'm going to end up doing here, I'm going to pray and we're going to get out of here and I'm going to see y'all for episode 2. So join me in prayer real quick, man. Heavenly Father, thank you guys, or thank you so much, Lord, for um, anyone that is tuned in to watch this, man. God bless them. I just pray that if they're struggling with anything, if there's any doubt in their mind, Lord, empower them, have your hand and will on their life, Lord. Lord, anything that you can do, Lord, we trust you. I'm just thankful for the perspective and the opportunity to relate to people to get this word out. Um, Lord, I want to put you at the center. I'm just so grateful, man. And once again, God bless everyone watching this, man. I just pray for them, their safety throughout the week. I just pray that you're with them, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this, and I'll see you next time.